The council chamber stretched out like a massive cathedral made of crystal and starlight. Daniel Cooper sat in the human delegation seat, his hands folded calmly on the polished table before him. 6 months had passed since humanity received its invitation to join the Galactic Council, and today marked their first major trade negotiation. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 47 different species occupied their designated spaces. Some breathed oxygen like humans, others sat in specialized environmental pods filled with methane or liquid ammonia. The diversity was staggering, and Daniel still felt a sense of wonder every time he entered this room. The current discussion centered on trade routes through the Andromeda approach, a region of space that would give humanity access to rare minerals needed for advanced computer systems. Daniel had spent 3 weeks preparing his presentation, working with economists and scientists back on Earth to create a fair proposal that would benefit multiple species. "The human delegation wishes to speak," Daniel said clearly, activating his translator node. The council speaker, a floating jellyfish-like being called a morphin, gestured with one of its many tentacles. The council recognizes Ambassador Cooper of Earth. Daniel stood and began his presentation. He explained how human mining techniques could extract the minerals more efficiently while causing less environmental damage to the asteroids in question. He showed data proving that their methods would actually increase the available resources for everyone. He proposed a partnership model where 3 other species would share in the profits. He thought it went well. The data was solid. The proposal was fair. Then High Commander Thex rose from the Braxton delegation area. The Braxton were a warrior species, tall and powerful with 4 arms and thick-scaled skin that gleamed like polished bronze. They had controlled the Andromeda approach for 200 years and clearly had no interest in sharing it with newcomers. "This council has heard enough childish babbling," Thex announced, his voice booming through the chamber's translation systems. "The humans come before us with their primitive ideas and simple mathematics, expecting to be taken seriously." Daniel felt his stomach tighten, but he kept his expression neutral. "High Commander, I assure you our data has been verified by independent sources." Thex laughed, a harsh barking sound that echoed off the crystal walls. "Verified? By whom?" "Other species as young and foolish as yourselves. Humanity has been in space for barely 2 centuries. My people were crossing galaxies when your ancestors were still living in caves." Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few whispered to their aides, but no one spoke up. "The Vraxen have reviewed your so-called advanced mining techniques," Thex continued, his 4 arms gesturing dramatically. "They are nothing but parlor tricks. Simple chemistry that any child in our educational systems learns before their 5th molt. You come here acting as though you have discovered something revolutionary, when in fact you are presenting us with basic science." Daniel's jaw clenched slightly, but his voice remained steady. "High Commander, if you have specific technical criticisms, I would welcome the opportunity to address them." "Technical criticisms?" Thex turned to address the wider council now, clearly enjoying himself. "The problem is not technical. The problem is that humanity believes it belongs at this table. You are emotional creatures, driven by feelings rather than logic. Your diplomatic methods are primitive. You smile and shake hands and make friends, thinking this is how civilizations interact." He turned back to Daniel, his vertical pupils narrowing. "Strength is what matters in this galaxy, Ambassador Cooper. Power and the wisdom that comes from millennia of experience. Humanity has neither. You are infants playing at politics, and this council demeans itself by entertaining your proposals." The chamber fell completely silent. Daniel could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. He wanted to respond, to defend his species and their accomplishments. Humanity had ended wars, cured diseases, built a peaceful solar system from centuries of conflict. They had so much to offer, but he also knew that losing his temper now would only prove Thex's point about humans being emotional and primitive. "I appreciate the High Commander's perspective," Daniel said carefully. "If the Council wishes to table this discussion for another time, humanity is willing to wait." Thex snorted dismissively and sat down. The Morphin speaker quickly moved the agenda forward to other business. Not a single other species mentioned the incident. Not one delegate stood to defend humanity or call out Thex's behavior as inappropriate. The session ended 2 hours later. Daniel gathered his materials slowly, watching as other delegates filed out. A few made eye contact and looked away quickly, clearly embarrassed but unwilling to get involved. Only Ambassador Quellen of the Benthic Collective approached him, her aquatic form rippling inside her water-filled containment suit. "That was unfortunate," she said quietly through her translator. "Yes," Daniel replied simply. "For what it is worth, many of us found your proposal quite reasonable." She paused. "But the Vraxen are very powerful. It is difficult to oppose them openly." Daniel nodded. I understand. Thank you for saying something, at least. After she left, Daniel stood alone in the massive chamber for a long moment. Then he activated his secure communication link back to Earth. President Helen Morris appeared on his holographic display within minutes. Her dark eyes were sharp with concern. We watched the entire session. Are you all right? I am fine, Madam President. But we need to discuss our response. Indeed we do. I am calling an emergency cabinet meeting within the hour. Can you send us the full recording with all the untranslated nuances? Already done. It should be in your system now. Helen studied him through the display. Daniel, I know that was difficult. You handled yourself with dignity. Thank you, but dignity does not change the fact that we were publicly humiliated and no one defended us. The Council now sees humanity as weak. Perhaps, Helen said thoughtfully. Or perhaps they are about to learn something about us. Get some rest, Daniel. We will send you instructions soon. The connection ended. Daniel left the council chamber and walked through the station's observation deck. Through the massive windows he could see Earth in the distance, a small blue marble among the stars. Somewhere down there, the most powerful leaders of humanity were deciding how to respond to this insult. He wondered what they would choose. Anger seemed justified. Demanding an apology made sense. Political pressure was certainly an option. But Daniel had a feeling that President Morris was thinking of something else entirely. Something the Vaxxan would not expect. Something that would remind the galaxy that humanity had not survived and thrived by being loud and aggressive. They had succeeded by being smart, patient, and most of all, strategic. Whatever came next, Daniel suspected High Commander Thex would regret underestimating the emotional primitive humans. 3 days passed after the incident in the council chamber, and the galaxy waited for humanity's response. Political analysts across dozens of worlds predicted everything from economic sanctions to formal demands for an apology. The Vaxxan prepared counter-arguments and defensive strategies. Other council species quietly placed bets on how the young race would handle its first major diplomatic crisis. Then humanity did something nobody expected. It went completely silent. Every diplomatic channel that humanity maintained with the Galactic Council simply stopped transmitting demands or complaints. Ambassador Daniel Cooper continued attending council sessions, but he said nothing about the insult. He voted on routine matters, participated in basic discussions, and acted as though High Commander Thex had never spoken those words. The silence was deafening. But while humanity's diplomatic corps went quiet, its scientists became remarkably loud. Lisa Grant stood in her laboratory on the research station orbiting Mars, recording her latest findings. She was a physician and geneticist, specializing in cross-species medical compatibility. For the past year, she had been studying how human medical techniques might help other galactic species. Publishing paper number 73, she said to her recording device. Advanced protein synthesis methods for treating cellular degradation in silicon-based life forms. All data included. No patents, no restrictions. Available to any species that needs it. Her assistant, a young researcher named Peter Kim, looked up from his workstation. Dr. Grant, are you sure about releasing this without protection? This research could be worth billions in licensing fees. Lisa smiled gently. That is exactly why we are releasing it for free, Peter. Knowledge that saves lives should not have a price tag. She uploaded the paper to the Galactic Scientific Network, joining dozens of other publications from human researchers over the past 72 hours. Each paper contained breakthrough research. Each one was offered freely to anyone who wanted it. Quantum mechanics studies that could improve faster than light travel, biotechnology advances that could extend lifespans, agricultural techniques that could feed billions more efficiently. All of it, released without asking for anything in return. On the outer colonies, human engineers were equally busy. Captain Nicole Peters commanded the civilian vessel Horizon Runner, a massive cargo ship that usually transported supplies between human settlements. But today she had diverted to the Quelar homeworld after receiving a distress signal. The Quelar were a small species, barely 4 feet tall with soft fur and large eyes. They had been council members for 300 years but held little political power. Most larger species ignored them completely. Nicole materialized on the planetary surface with her engineering team. The Kalar planetary governor, a nervous individual named Trill, met them at the landing pad. Captain Peters, thank you for coming, but we cannot afford to pay human rates for this assistance, Trill said immediately, his ears drooping with embarrassment. Nicole waved her hand dismissively. We are not here for payment, Governor. Your message said you were having problems with your water purification systems.
We came to help. But why?
The Quellar have no alliance with humanity. We did not even speak up when the Vraxen insulted your ambassador last week. Nicole crouched down to meet Trill's eyes directly. Governor, people need clean water. That is reason enough. Now show us the systems and let us get to work. Over the next 6 days, Nicole's team completely rebuilt the failing infrastructure. They trained Quellar engineers in maintenance procedures. They left behind spare parts and detailed manuals.
When they finally prepared to leave, Trill tried once again to discuss payment.
Please, we must offer something. This work you have done, it will save thousands of lives. Nicole smiled warmly. Then our payment is knowing those lives are saved. Take care, Governor Trill. If you need help again, just call. Similar scenes played out across a dozen worlds. Human medical teams arrived on the benthic colony stations, helping to treat a mysterious illness that had been spreading through their population. Human agricultural specialists traveled to Lorath settlements, sharing techniques that could increase crop yields by 40%. None of them asked for money. None demanded political favors. They simply helped, then moved on to the next species that needed assistance. Back at the Galactic Council headquarters, the political impact was impossible to ignore. Ambassador Daniel sat in the council dining area eating a simple meal when Ambassador Quelline of the Benthic Collective approached his table. "May I sit?" she asked, her form rippling with what Daniel had learned to recognize as agitation. Of course. Quelline settled into the chair designed for her water-filled containment suit. "Ambassador Cooper, I must know, is this some kind of strategy? The free research, the humanitarian missions, the complete lack of response to the Vraxen insult?" Daniel took a sip of his coffee before answering. "Strategy makes it sound calculated and cold, Ambassador. We are simply doing what we believe is right." "But you must want some..." "Species do not give away valuable knowledge for nothing. They do not send their best engineers and doctors to help strangers without expecting something in return," Daniel asked simply. "We have the knowledge. We have the resources. Other species need help. It seems logical to share." Quellin's translator made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sigh. "You are either incredibly naive or incredibly clever. I have not yet determined which. Perhaps we are simply human," Daniel replied with a slight smile. 3 weeks after the insult, High Commander Thex called for a private meeting with Ambassador Daniel. They met in a neutral conference room with no aides or witnesses present. Thex paced back and forth on his 4 powerful legs, clearly frustrated. "What is humanity doing, Cooper?"
What is your game?
Daniel remained seated, calm, and relaxed. "I am not sure I understand your question, High Commander."
The research publications?
"The free assistance to minor species. The complete lack of response to my words in the council chamber. What are you trying to accomplish?" "We are trying to be good neighbors," Daniel said simply. "We are new to this galaxy, High Commander. We have much to learn, but we also have much to offer. It seems wasteful to keep our knowledge locked away when it could help others." Thex stopped pacing and stared at the human ambassador. "You expect me to believe you have no ulterior motive? That you are helping the Quellar and the Benthic and the Lorath out of pure kindness? I expect you to believe whatever makes sense to you, High Commander. But yes, that is exactly what we are doing." "This is weakness," Thex growled. "You give away your advantages for nothing. You allow insults to go unanswered. The Vraxen would never show such softness." Daniel stood now, meeting the much taller alien's gaze steadily. "High Commander, humanity learned something important in our history. We learned that strength comes in many forms. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is help someone who cannot help you in return. Sometimes power is measured not by what you take, but by what you freely give." Thex said nothing for a long moment. Then he turned and left the room without another word. Daniel sat back down and allowed himself a small smile. The Vraxen commander was confused, which meant he was thinking. That was progress. All across the galaxy, the news networks were beginning to notice what humanity was doing. Independent journalists interviewed the species that humans had helped. The stories spread through channels the Council could not control. And in those stories, humanity looked nothing like the primitive, emotional children that Thex had described. They looked like exactly the kind of neighbors everyone wanted to have. 2 months had passed since the council chamber incident, and the political landscape of the galaxy had shifted in ways nobody anticipated. The changes started small, like ripples spreading across a pond, but those ripples were growing into waves. Governor Trill of the Galactic Council, something his species rarely did. The small furry being looked nervous as he addressed the assembly, but his voice remained firm. "The Quellar people wish to formally thank humanity for their assistance with our water crisis." Thanks to Captain Nicole Peters and her team, we no longer face the threat of drought and disease. They asked for nothing in return. They simply helped because we needed help. High Commander Thex shifted in his seat, his forearms crossed in obvious irritation. This was the third such statement in as many weeks. First, the Benthic Collective had praised human medical assistance. Then the Lorath had shared how human agricultural knowledge saved their failing crops. Now the Quailar. Daniel Cooper sat quietly in the human delegation area, taking notes on his datapad. He did not smile or show any satisfaction. He simply listened. After the session ended, something unusual happened. 7 ambassadors from smaller species approached Daniel together, a unified group that rarely formed among the minor council members. Ambassador Quellen spoke for them. "We wish to discuss something with you privately, Ambassador Cooper. Would you have time this evening?" "Of course," Daniel replied. My quarters at 8? That evening, Daniel's modest apartment filled with representatives from species that normally had little voice in council politics. The Kilar, the Benthic Collective, the Lorath, and 4 others. They gathered around his simple dining table, some sitting, some floating, some standing. "We have been talking among ourselves," Quellen began carefully, "about the incident 2 months ago, about how the Vraxen treated humanity and how the rest of us remained silent." "That is in the past," Daniel said gently. "No, it is not," Trill interrupted, his large eyes blinking rapidly. "It matters because we were cowards. We let the Vraxen insult you because we feared their power. And then you responded not with anger, but with kindness. You helped us even though we did nothing to defend you." An ambassador from the Lorath, a crystalline being named Shard, chimed in. "We have been discussing a proposal. A formal vote of censure against the Vraxen for conduct unbecoming of council leadership." Daniel set down his tea carefully. "That is a serious step. The Vraxen are very powerful. Such a vote could create significant political problems for all of you." "We know," Quellen said. "But we have been thinking about something you said to me weeks ago. You said knowledge should be shared because it can help others. Well, we have learned something we wish to share. We learned that remaining silent in the face of injustice makes us complicit in that injustice. The Vraxen have bullied smaller species for decades," Shard added, his crystalline form refracting the room's light into rainbow patterns. "We accepted it because we felt powerless, but watching how humanity responded to their insult, we realized that power comes in different forms. We may not have military might, but we have voices and votes." Daniel looked at each of them carefully. "I appreciate what you are trying to do, but I need you to understand something important. Humanity does not want revenge. We did not help you to create political allies against the Vraxen. We helped because it was the right thing to do."
"We know that," Trill said softly. "That is exactly why we want to do this."
"Not for you, but for ourselves. We are tired of being afraid." The vote came 2 weeks later. 8 minor species co-sponsored a formal censure motion against the Vraxen for conduct unbecoming of council leadership in violation of basic diplomatic respect. The motion cited High Commander Thex's words as an example of the bullying behavior that had gone unchallenged for too long. The council chamber buzzed with shocked whispers as the motion was read aloud. Thex stood immediately, his bronze scales gleaming with barely controlled rage. "This is absurd. The minor species have no right to question Vraxen conduct. We have led this council for 500 years. "And perhaps that is the problem," Quellen replied, her aquatic form rippling with newfound confidence. "Leadership should be earned through respect, not maintained through intimidation." The debate raged for hours. The Vraxen tried to dismiss the motion as political theater orchestrated by humanity. But Daniel remained silent throughout, not speaking a single word in humanity's defense or in support of the motion. Finally, Ambassador Shard addressed this directly. "The Vraxen claim humanity is manipulating us, but Ambassador Cooper has not said one word during this entire debate. He has not lobbied for our support. In fact, he tried to discourage us from bringing this motion at all. We are doing this because we choose to, not because anyone asked us to." The vote did not pass. The major powers on the council, including several Vraxen allies, blocked it, but the fact that it came to a vote at all sent shockwaves through galactic politics. Minor species had united and challenged a major power. That had not happened in living memory. After the session, Daniel found High Commander Thex waiting outside his office. "You orchestrated this," Thex accused immediately. "I did not," Daniel replied calmly. "In fact, I specifically told them not to do it." "Then why did they?" Daniel considered his answer carefully. Because people get tired of being afraid, High Commander. They get tired of watching injustice and staying silent.
You gave them a reason to find their courage.
By insulting you? By showing them what unchecked power looks like. You demonstrated that even in the Galactic Council might still tries to make right. They decided they disagreed with that principle. Thex's vertical pupils narrowed. You are more dangerous than I thought, Cooper. You weaponized kindness. No, Daniel said firmly. We simply showed kindness, and other people responded to it. That is not a weapon. That is just how civilization should work. The Vraxan commander left without another word, but Daniel could see the calculation in his eyes. The political landscape had shifted, and Thex knew it. 3 days later, something remarkable happened. Captain Nicole Peters was conducting a routine cargo run near the benthic stations when her sensors detected a massive solar flare approaching one of their research platforms. The platform's shields were down for maintenance. Without protection, everyone aboard would die. Nicole did not hesitate. She pushed her ship's engines past safety limits, racing against the wall of radiation. Her crew worked frantically, extending their own shields to cover the platform just as the flare hit. The Horizon Runner absorbed radiation damage that would take months to repair. But the benthic researchers survived, all 47 of them. When asked why she risked her ship and crew for people she had never met, Nicole gave a simple answer that spread across every news network in the galaxy. Because they needed help, and we could provide it. That is what neighbors do. The story reached every corner of known space. Independent journalists compared it to High Commander Thex's words about humanity being primitive and emotional. The contrast was devastating. One editorial that went viral across multiple networks put it simply, the Vraxan tell us that strength and ancient wisdom matter most. But when crisis comes, it is the young, emotional humans who fly into danger to save lives. Perhaps we need to reconsider what we value in this galaxy. In his private quarters, Daniel read the editorial and allowed himself a quiet moment of satisfaction. Humanity had not sought revenge. They had not demanded apologies. They had simply continued being who they were, helping where they could, showing compassion where others showed indifference. And the galaxy was taking notice. High Commander Thex was beginning to realize that he had made a serious miscalculation. He had attacked what he saw as weakness, not understanding that humanity's greatest strength was exactly what he had mocked: their emotional connections, their willingness to help, their refusal to let insults change who they were. The real battle had never been about trade routes or political power. It was about what kind of civilization the galaxy wanted to be, and humanity was showing them a different possibility. The emergency council session was called just 3 months after the original insult, and the atmosphere in the crystal chamber felt completely different from that day. Ambassador Daniel Cooper arrived early, as he always did, and took his seat in the human delegation area. He noticed the nervous energy among the representatives, the whispered conversations that stopped when others approached. The session began with formal announcements, but everyone knew why they were really there. The benthic collective had called for a full council vote on their censor motion against the Vraxan. This time they had the required number of sponsors to force a vote that could not be blocked by procedure. Ambassador Quellen rose to present the motion, her aquatic form shimmering with determination inside her containment suit. This council was founded on principles of mutual respect and cooperation among species. When those principles are violated, we all suffer. The Vraxan leadership's treatment of the human delegation 3 months ago was not just an insult to one species. It was an insult to the very idea of this council. High Commander Thex stood immediately, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of dismissal. The benthic speak of principles while they parade their new human friends before us like prizes. This entire motion is political theater, orchestrated by a species that has been here for less than a year. Then let humanity speak to that accusation, said Ambassador Shard of the Lorath, his crystalline body refracting light across the chamber. Ambassador Cooper, did you or any human official encourage this motion? All eyes turned to Daniel. He stood slowly, aware that his next words would be analyzed and debated across the galaxy. He had prepared carefully for this moment. No, Daniel said simply. We did not encourage it. In fact, when Ambassador Quellen and others first approached me about this idea, I advised them against it. I told them that humanity did not seek revenge or political advantage from what happened. Thex made a sound of satisfaction, but Daniel was not finished. I told them that if they believed this motion was right, if they believed it would make the council better and stronger, then they should follow their own conscience. Because that is what free beings do. They make their own choices. Daniel paused, looking around the chamber at the dozens of species represented there. High Commander Thex accused my species of being emotional and primitive 3 months ago. He said, we are driven by feelings rather than logic. He may be right about the emotional part. We do feel things deeply. We feel compassion when others suffer. We feel joy when we can help. We feel sadness when we see injustice. His voice remained calm but grew stronger. But I would argue that emotions are not a weakness. They are what makes civilization worth building in the first place. Logic tells us to maximize our own advantage. Emotion tells us to care about others even when there is no advantage to gain. Several council members shifted in their seats. Some nodded slightly. Others looked uncomfortable. The Vraxen are correct that they have more experience than humanity, Daniel continued. They have been in space for millennia while we are newcomers, but experience should teach wisdom, not arrogance. And wisdom should teach us that strength comes in many forms. He turned to face Thex directly now. High Commander, you called our diplomatic methods primitive. You laughed at our tendency to make friends and build relationships. But in the 3 months since that day, those primitive methods have accomplished something remarkable. We have built genuine connections with species across this galaxy, not through threats or power plays, but through simple acts of service. Thex's scales seemed to darken with anger, but he said nothing. Daniel's tone softened slightly. I do not tell you this to boast. I tell you this because I want you to understand something important. Humanity did not help the Quelar, or the Benthic, or the Lorath to make you look bad. We helped them because they needed help and we could provide it. If the Vraxen needed help tomorrow, we would offer the same assistance without hesitation. He paused to let that sink in. That is not weakness, High Commander. That is strength. The strength to put principle above pride. The strength to serve rather than dominate. The strength to build up rather than tear down. The chamber fell completely silent. Daniel took a breath before delivering his final point. But here is what I really want to say to this council. This vote today should not be about punishing the Vraxen. It should not be about choosing sides or creating divisions. It should be about what kind of council we want to be. He gestured around the chamber. Do we want a council where power determines right? Where the strong can insult the weak without consequence? Where fear keeps people silent in the face of injustice? Or do we want a council where every species, large or small, old or young, is treated with basic respect? Daniel looked at each section of the chamber as he spoke. Disagreement is healthy. Debate is necessary. Even strong criticism has its place. But cruelty and mockery do not. They diminish us all. He sat down, his statement complete. The chamber remained quiet for a long moment. Then something unexpected happened. Ambassador Jennifer Cole, the human representative for scientific affairs, stood and requested permission to speak. Daniel looked at her with surprise. They had not planned this. I have an announcement, Jennifer said, her voice clear and confident. Regardless of the outcome of today's vote, humanity wishes to present a gift to this council and all its member species. She activated a holographic display that appeared above the center of the chamber. This is the complete human medical and engineering database. Every piece of research we have conducted in the past 200 years, every innovation, every discovery, every technique, we are offering it freely to all council members with no restrictions and no patents. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The value of such information was incalculable. Why would you do this? Asked a representative from the Morphin, the floating jellyfish-like beings who served as council administrators. Jennifer smiled. Because knowledge grows when it is shared. Because these discoveries could save lives and improve civilizations across the galaxy. Because we believe that rising together is better than climbing alone. She glanced at the Vraxen delegation. This offer includes the Vraxen, of course. We hope that our research might benefit your people as well. High Commander Thex stared at the holographic display, his expression unreadable. Around the chamber, representatives whispered frantically to their aides, trying to comprehend what had just been offered. The contrast was devastating and deliberate. On one side stood the Vraxen, who had condemned humanity as primitive and worthless. On the other side stood humanity, offering its most valuable resources to everyone, including those who had insulted them. Ambassador Shard spoke into the stunned silence. The Lorath have a saying, actions reveal truth that words conceal. Today we have seen truth revealed. The vote proceeded, but the outcome felt almost secondary now. The motion of censure passed with a narrow majority, enough to be recorded in council history, but not enough to trigger any real consequences for the Vraxen. Several major powers abstained, unwilling to fully oppose Vraxen influence, but also unwilling to defend their behavior. But the real damage to Vraxan prestige had nothing to do with the vote itself. It came from the simple fact that humanity had offered generosity in response to insult, knowledge in response to mockery, and kindness in response to cruelty. As the session ended and delegates filed out, Daniel noticed something significant. Several species that had historically aligned with the Vraxan were now keeping their distance from Thex, not openly breaking alliances but creating subtle space, sending a message. Ambassador Quellen approached Daniel with what he had learned to recognize as her species' expression of deep satisfaction. That was masterfully done, Ambassador Cooper. Both your speech and Ambassador Cole's announcement. We simply told the truth, Daniel replied. Yes, and sometimes the truth is the most powerful weapon of all. Daniel shook his head gently. Not a weapon, Ambassador. Just a tool for building something better. High Commander Thex did not leave the chamber immediately. He stood in the Vraxan delegation area, watching the other species interact with the human representatives, asking questions about the database, expressing gratitude and friendship. For the first time since the insult, Thex appeared uncertain. He had expected strength to triumph over weakness, experience to overcome youth, pride to defeat humility. Instead, he was watching his political influence crumble, not because humanity had attacked him, but because they had shown the galaxy a better way. And the galaxy was listening. 5 days after the council vote, Ambassador Daniel Cooper received an unexpected message on his private communication channel. The sender was High Commander Thex, requesting a meeting with no aides, no witnesses, and no official record. Just the two of them. Daniel agreed immediately and suggested a neutral location, one of the meditation gardens that dotted the council station. These peaceful spaces were designed for quiet reflection, with plants from dozens of worlds growing together in careful harmony. He arrived early and found Thex already there, standing beside a fountain that flowed with liquid mercury instead of water, a feature designed for silicon-based species who found beauty in metals rather than organic matter. Thank you for coming, Ambassador Cooper, Thex said, his voice lacking its usual booming authority. He sounded tired. Of course, High Commander. How can I help you? Thex made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sigh. Help me. That is such a human phrase, is it not? Always offering to help. He turned to face Daniel fully, his forearms hanging at his sides in a posture that Daniel had learned indicated uncertainty among the Vraxans. I need to understand something. What is humanity doing? What is your real strategy? Daniel gestured to a nearby bench designed for bipedal species. May we sit? This might take some time to explain. They sat together, an odd pairing of species and cultures. Thex towered over the human even while seated, but somehow the size difference felt less important than it had months before. There is no hidden strategy, High Commander, Daniel began carefully. What you see is what we are. We believe in helping others. We believe in building relationships through service and respect. We believe that civilization works better when we lift each other up rather than tear each other down. But you must want something, Thex insisted. No species gives away their advantages for nothing. Your medical database alone is worth trillions in potential revenue. Your engineering knowledge could have given you leverage over dozens of species, yet you give it all away freely, even to those who insult you. Daniel was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. High Commander, may I tell you something about human history? It is not a pleasant story, but it is an important one. Please, for most of our existence as a species, we behaved much like you described. We fought over resources. We dominated when we could, and submitted when we must. We measured strength by our ability to defeat enemies and accumulate power. And we nearly destroyed ourselves because of it. Daniel's voice grew softer, touched with old pain. 200 years ago, we stood on the edge of extinction. We had weapons capable of ending all life on our planet, and we came very close to using them. We had poisoned our own air and water. We had turned our home into a battlefield where nobody could truly win. Thex listened without interrupting, his vertical pupils fixed on the human ambassador. But something changed, Daniel continued. Not quickly and not easily. We started to realize that our old ways of thinking were killing us. We learned that real strength was not about dominating others. Real strength was about controlling ourselves. About choosing cooperation over conquest. About building rather than destroying. He turned to look at Thex directly. We learned these lessons through terrible suffering, High Commander. Millions died before we finally understood. So when we came to the stars and found this great council of species, we made a choice. We decided to share what we learned, to offer what we could, to be the kind of neighbors we wished we had been to each other. That is why you did not respond with anger when I insulted you, Thex said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn in his eyes. Exactly. Because anger would have felt good for a moment, but it would have taught the galaxy nothing useful. It would have just been another species proving they could be aggressive when provoked. But showing patience, showing kindness even in the face of insult, that taught something different. Thex was silent for a long time, processing this. Finally, he spoke again. I misunderstood humanity completely. I saw your emotions as weakness. I saw your kindness as naivety. I saw your willingness to help others as a lack of self-interest. Many species make that mistake at first, Daniel said without judgment. It looks like weakness because it is different from how power usually operates. But it is not weakness at all, Thex said, and there was something like wonder in his voice. It is strategic brilliance. In 3 months, without firing a single weapon or making a single threat, humanity has built more genuine alliances than the Vraxen have maintained in centuries. Species trust you. They admire you. They want to be like you. We do not do it to be admired, Daniel said gently. We do it because it is right. But yes, trust is valuable. Friendship is valuable. Not because of what it can get us, but because civilization is better when we genuinely care about each other's well-being. Thex stood and walked to the mercury fountain, his reflection distorting in the liquid metal. My people have been wrong about many things. We believed that age brought wisdom automatically. We believed that strength meant the ability to dominate. We believed that showing emotion or compassion was a sign of inferior thinking. He turned back to Daniel. When I insulted humanity in the council chamber, I thought I was putting an upstart species in its place. Instead, I created an opportunity for you to show the entire galaxy what true leadership looks like. I handed you a victory without even realizing it. It was never about victory, High Commander. I know that now. That is what makes it so effective. Thex returned to the bench, settling his large frame with visible weariness. So where does this leave us, Ambassador Cooper? The Vraxen have lost face. Our allies distance themselves from us. The minor species no longer fear us as they once did. What happens now? Daniel considered the question carefully. That depends on what the Vraxen want to happen. You could view this as a defeat and become bitter. You could try to regain your old position through intimidation and power plays. Or you could see this as an opportunity. An opportunity for what? To build something new. To show that ancient species can learn new wisdom. To demonstrate that strength can include compassion. Daniel paused. The galaxy does not need the Vacran to become exactly like humans. But perhaps there is room for the Vraxen to become the best version of themselves. Thex was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight of decision. What would you say if I proposed a formal, cultural exchange between our species? Vraxen students studying on Earth, human students studying on our home world. Scientists sharing knowledge, artists sharing perspectives. Daniel felt genuine surprise and pleasure at the suggestion. I would say that sounds like an excellent beginning, High Commander. Not an alliance. Not yet. We have too much pride to move that quickly, and truthfully, we do not fully trust you yet. That is fair, Daniel acknowledged. Trust must be earned over time. But a beginning, Thex continued. A chance to learn from each other. A chance for my people to understand what we have been missing by viewing everything through the lens of dominance and submission. Then I accept, and I will recommend that my government accept as well. They sat together in the garden for another hour, discussing the practical details of such an exchange. But more than that, they simply talked. Tex asked about human history, genuinely curious now rather than dismissive. Daniel asked about Vraxen culture, their art, their philosophy, the things that made them who they were beyond their warrior reputation. When they finally prepared to leave, Thex paused at the garden entrance. I will not apologize for my words in the council chamber, Cooper. That is not the Vraxen way. I understand. But I will say this. I was wrong about humanity. You are not primitive or weak. You are perhaps the most advanced species I have encountered because you have learned to master yourselves. That is a lesson the Vraxen have yet to fully embrace. Daniel nodded respectfully. And the Vraxen have lessons to teach us as well, High Commander. You have survived and thrived for millennia. That requires wisdom we have yet to develop. Perhaps we can learn from each other. 2 weeks later, the formal announcement came. The Vraxen Empire and the United Nations of Earth would establish a comprehensive cultural exchange program. Vraxen warriors would train with human peacekeepers. Human artists would study ancient Vraxen sculpture techniques. Scientists from both species would collaborate on projects combining human innovation with Vraxen experience. The galaxy watched with fascination as two species that seemed destined for rivalry instead chose cooperation. News networks analyzed it endlessly. Political theorists wrote papers about it. Younger species studied it as a model for conflict resolution. In a quiet office on the council station, Dr. Lisa Grant met with her first Vraxen medical student, a young physician named Kreth, who wanted to understand human approaches to treating trauma. In a workshop 3 levels down, Kevin Walsh, the engineer who had helped repair the Lorath generation ship, welcomed a team of Vraxen technicians interested in learning human maintenance techniques. And in her ship, orbiting a distant moon, Captain Nicole Peters received a message from a Vraxen military captain asking if she would be willing to train Vraxen rescue crews in her emergency response methods. She smiled and immediately sent back her acceptance. Ambassador Daniel sat in his quarters that evening, watching Earth rise above the station's horizon through his window. President Helen Morris appeared on his communication display, her expression warm with satisfaction. "You did well, Daniel. Better than we hoped." "We all did, Madam President. This was never about one person or one moment. It was about showing the galaxy who we are through consistent action. The Council insulted humanity," Helen said thoughtfully. "And humanity refused to respond with anything but calm, compassion, and conviction. That will be remembered long after the details of trade routes and political motions are forgotten." Daniel nodded. "We chose to be who we are rather than who they expected us to be. In the end, that made all the difference." After the call ended, Daniel remained at the window, looking at his homeworld in the distance. Humanity had not won a victory in the traditional sense. They had done something more important. They had shown the galaxy a different way forward, a path where strength included kindness, where power included service, where winning meant lifting everyone higher. And the galaxy, slowly but surely, was beginning to follow.